hereby called to order. This time, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Stone, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everyone. Okay, welcome to our nightly meeting. We have the Public Works Departments going tonight. I just want to point out for the record that Tom Flynn, our chairman, will not be here tonight for obvious reasons. The funeral for his dad was today, so he's with his family where he should be. So I'll be pinch hitting for him again this evening. He'll probably be back next week, so you just have me to deal with for tonight, and then you get a break. All right, let's get things rolling here. The first budget up for discussion is the Public Works Administration budget. That is item number 5011, and it's on page 197 of our budget books.
I had a different schedule.
Did you?
Yep.
You know what, Jim? I have no problem going. I have no problem getting you first. Any objection from the board of taking care of building first?
Well, it was sent to me, so that's why I thought.
Well, if it's sent to you, then you know it's official. So
You're wrong.
I'm wrong.
You make it fit.
that's how you're a happily married man for all these years, Jim.
What are we going to talk about first, then?
Not my building.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Gillerin. If you could just give us a very brief synopsis of your budget and just, you know, what are the big things we really need to... Oh, you guys want everything. Page 209. If you could just highlight some of the important items and any of the big drivers up or down, and we'll throw it to questions after that, please.
There, believe it or not, there isn't any. The only increase is in contractual increase in salaries for my my employees,
Right.
and
That's
that's
with the
it.
Thea contract, right?
Yeah, that's it. 2.9%. There's no capital.
Okay.
Nothing.
All right. At this time, I'll throw it open to board members for any questions, comments, concerns. Sorry, Mr. Brockfeld, please.
209, 210, is that right?
That's correct.
And I just flipped it open, so I'll make sure. I see, oh, okay. Why is the number 7.36 on your payroll? Oh, sorry. You enjoying your biscotti, Mr. Hill? Okay.
Was that a threat?
No, I just want to go on record on video that I brought biscotti. I'm just,
Ken's proud of his snack choice
yeah,
this evening,
exactly.
as he should be.
I'm sorry.
We rather have donuts.
7.36%?
The 7.36 in the payroll,
Yeah,
I'd
just,
have
how
to,
does that break out?
Linda.
Ms. Gardner, please.
All except Jimmy, all employees except Jimmy are Thea. All of his inspectors are Thea, and they received an increase.
So does this represent retroactive money that's?
Yeah, 3
okay.
years' worth of increase.
Gotcha, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, any other board members have questions? Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey.
Thanks, Mr. Bolito. The health insurance actives number line going down by negative 9.35, could you?
We're going to talk about all of that the 20th, I believe,
Okay. So hold
in
off.
one fell swoop.
Okay, thank you. May I have another?
Certainly.
Okay. Mr. Gillerin, I just wanted to take note of what you have in the narrative, and I'd like to just read it out. We would like the second full-time secretary restored at a lower grade to save some money and take over some of the work one person has been doing for over a year and a half with no compensation. But that's not here in your budget.
It was taken out by the first selectman.
Okay. Just operationally, how is that impacting operations? I know I've had my own experiences in the office in terms of,
Yeah,
there's only so much one person can do. So what's the practical impact?
Yeah, well, I've been here for 25 years. There's always been 2 secretaries in the department. One of them retired almost 2 years ago now, and she was never replaced. What happened, I asked for that position to be filled last year. This board asked me if I could get away with 1 secretary or 1.4, and I said absolutely not. Asked my secretary. She was sitting behind me. And, you know, if she's out for a week, she comes back to 2 weeks' worth of work. So taking vacation, sick days, or anything, I mean, she comes back to all the work. No permits are issued, no, you know, they'll sit there till she comes back.
So basically, you're saying that,
And what I did, I went with a proposition to lower the grade. I went to Human Resources, went to the Selectman's office, to lower the grade 5 to a grade 3, just so that, you know, the more minimal tasks of filing and stuff like that, and scheduling and answering phone calls could be done, you know, by the grade 3. And actually, at a grade, that's originally what the grade was over my 16 years of being the building official. About my third year into it, I hired my second secretary, and I got her to a grade 5, because they both did the same job. If one was out, the other one did the job. We never have temps in the office. You know, there was always somebody there to do the job, you know, to enter the permit information, schedule. You know, it was a lot of work for a person for a week, but then when that other person came back, they could cover for that person if they were out, you know, if there was anybody out sick. And it's just, it's way too much work, and the girl that's doing the work now is working above and beyond the call of duty. She's, you know, she has too much to do. And I don't blame her, she's not happy.
so if I heard you correctly, you said permits aren't getting issued. In other words, we're having delays.
In other words, the guys
people are
will
out.
leave them with us, we'll go over the paperwork and leave it, and they will be typed up and emailed to them as soon as she comes back.
Okay.
In other words, the permit will be issued verbally, okay? No paperwork, no bank transactions or anything will be done until she comes back to the office.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCarthy-Vehy. Mr. DeWitt?
Quick question. You're right next to Conservation.
Yes.
Conservation has a part-time clerk. Could you utilize a person between the two? Maybe you could
Well,
share
we
the
are,
pain
we
a
are
little bit?
utilizing I get 4/10 of a person from planning and zoning, and they get her for I get her from 8:30 till 12 o'clock, and they get her the rest of the day and on Fridays. So I only get her 4 days a week. But,
Maybe your plus-up could be a plus half with Conservation. Then you can have half a person from, who'd you say loans you have a person? Planning and zoning.
planning and zoning. I actually went with a proposal to the selectmen, that we said we'd discuss at a later date, to actually, I mean, the Connecticut general statutes and the charter, I'm the one that sets the fees in the office. And I set them according to manning and staff in the office and taking care of my own budget. I proposed to raise the fees $3 a thousand, and that would make up that 4/10 to a full-time person, including their benefits.
Building fees you're talking?
Yeah. Increase the building fees $3. $3 on the valuation. In other words, we get the fee for the building permits from the valuation of the job.
Right.
So it's based on, you know, they give us a price on the job. The first $1,000 is $51, and every $1,000 after that is $12. So we were going
make it
to
50
raise
to
it
14.
$15, and it would have taken care of the position.
Sounds like a happy compromise.
That's what I thought, too. But apparently not.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Any other board members have questions, comments at this time? Ms. McCarthy-Vehy?
Yeah, actually, I think Mrs. Gardner has a.
I'm sorry, Mrs.
Response.
Gardner, please.
Since you got into the discussion of staff, it dovetails really into the reason that health insurance is lower, and I'd just like to quickly address that.
Certainly,
Instead of
please.
waiting, last year, when Jim asked for a full-time secretary, and this board cut the full-time secretary, at that time, I asked if you wanted me to cut the attendant benefits. And it was the board's pleasure not to, because we were trying to build up the insurance reserve. So when you're looking budget over budget, we were carrying health insurance for a position that was not fully funded. So when Jim received 4/10 of that position, 6/10 were cut. So that's why it appears as if there was a reduction in the health insurance year over year. But we're going to talk about that when we talk about health
Right.
insurance in general. But since you were into that staffing discussion, I just wanted to.
No, that's helpful.
add
I
on.
appreciate that.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Mr. Gillen, is there anything that you can do in terms of working with IT or automating anything that would help?
No,
Processing.
actually, I have some IT questions that actually came up 3 or 4 years ago when Nancy Nash was handling IT. We were to get licenses for other departments so that they could, had read-only access to everything going on in our office, because we constantly, sending stuff to the assessor's office, sending stuff to the tax collector. We have to, on delinquent tax payers, we have to send somebody over to the other building to have their taxes checked, rather than just have a list of delinquent payers, and then we won't issue them, a building permit. But in the meantime, they have to walk over to the other building. Our software provides for that. We can get sign-offs from other offices. I asked for 6 licenses at $250 apiece for engineering, the fire marshal's office, planning and zoning, health department, and the assessor's office. And there might have been one other one in there, too. But they were approved. I don't know why they were never ordered and why they were never installed. And I'm going back 3 years ago. And it was part of Nancy Nash's budget when she was handling IT, and we never saw them. And that would definitely make it easier on the secretary now, because when the assessor wants some information, or a realtor comes in, or an attorney comes in, I mean, there's one person there in the afternoon. Unless I'm there, then I'll go downstairs and look for the information and try to get it to them the same day instead of telling them to come back in 2 weeks. I mean, most of them are looking for closing on houses and, doing title searches and stuff for lawsuits. You just can't make them wait. Actually, the state of Connecticut asked me if I would mind joining a team with them to go over the state records retention schedule, so we can get rid of all that old stuff, and, that's it, so.
So it sounds like there are some solutions that were,
Yeah, that solution
And actually
should have been
approved,
taken
but-
care of. I don't know why it wasn't.
well, I hope that can be followed through upon, maybe the first selectman and you can work together with IT and see if that can be something to help relieve the stress in your office.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, yeah, that will help, when conservation or zoning or the fire marshal's office or the assessor's office wants information, they can just look it up. In other words, they can't overwrite anything, it's a read-only, but they can print out all the reports, the same reports that we print out. Paul asks me for reports every year, financial reports for this and that. He can just go on, click on reports, do, daily receipts, here they are.
Sounds great.
And like I said, the licenses for each machine are only $250.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gillen. Anything further? Okay. Any other questions, comments from board members? Mr. Brown, please.
Staying in the narrative, you stated 4,328 permits were issued?
Yes.
2010. How does that compare to a couple years previous to that?
Actually, I think it was, the difference in the number of permits, let's see, did I, 4,328, I think,
Did you also mention that the revenue was higher than anticipated?
last year the revenue was higher than anticipated. We anticipated it at 1.2 million. I think we came in at over 1.5. But this year I was told, gee, we're behind in revenue. Well, I can't tell TPZ what to do or conservation, to approve projects, to get them out. The projects are there, they're still on paper, they're still in somewhere. They haven't gotten here, but smaller jobs have come in. We looked at, at one time I was asked about the revenue, gee, you're $300,000 behind last year. Well, that $300,000 in revenue were 4 projects. 2 of them done by Fairfield University, 1 of them done by Whole Foods, and 1 of them done by Sacred Heart University. We don't have those every year. Those are, projects where the revenue from them are, well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And without those projects, I can't figure out any other way to get it. So, I mean, I know there's a business school going at Sacred Heart that's in the works. There's 3 or 4 medical buildings that are either in planning and zoning or they're in conservation for some reason. And there's other projects out there. They just can't get through. Once they get to my office, we get the revenue, but we don't get it until then.
You good, Mr. Brown, or anything further?
It's fine, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from board members? All right, seeing none, we'll go to the public. Any questions or, comments only on the building department budget from the public? Seeing none, we'll come back to the board one last time. Anything final on the building department budget? All right, Mr. Gillerin, thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. It's the Rich and Scott Show. Come on up. Just a programming note, those of you who have the schedule, the third line down on Public Works flood and erosion control, that has actually been merged into the Public Works Administration budget, which is the top of the list, so one less line to do. So we'll start it off with Public Works Administration. Mr. White, Mr. Bartlett, good evening.
Good evening.
That would be page 197, right?
The bottom line increase for the Public Works Administration budget is 1.84%. And if you look at the accounts, non-personnel related, there is only one slight increase for communication accounts for cell phones. So I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. White. I actually just wanted to jump in with one because it kind of leaped out at me. In the narrative, you point out that you received approval for 2 grants which will pay for most of the costs of a new natural gas-powered senior bus. Is that different from the bus that was being asked for by Human Services last night? Could someone speak to that?
That's the same.
Yes, that's a bus that this board, the RTM, had previously appropriated 20% in the grant. That bus has recently been received and is being placed into service.
Okay, so we're talking about 2 different things then.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
The other one is not contemplated as a natural gas bus, but, not certain if it's gasoline or diesel, but
And this will be used for transport of senior citizens here in town?
yes,
Okay, and it's wheelchair accessible and all that?
yes.
Just gas-powered? Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, I'll turn it over to fellow board members. Any questions, comments on this budget? Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey.
Frequent flyer here. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for being here with us. And the communications cell phone increase, and I asked Sands Cleary this the other night in terms of cell phones and how you work with purchasing. Obviously, we have cell phones in lots of different departments. Do you do that collectively with purchasing, or do you have your own system or separate contracts that you have?
No, it's a contract that comes out of IT
Okay. Great,
that we hop onto.
great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCarthy-Vehy. Any other board members have questions or comments on this budget? Seeing none. We'll go to the public on the Public Works Administration budget. Any comments from the public on the Public Works Administration budget? Seeing none, back to the board. Final thoughts on this one? All right, moving along then. Public Works Operations, which Mr. Brockfeld is on page 201. Actually, was on top of it this time. Please.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to make initially a comment on the bottom line, which, as you see before you, is 6.78%. But if you take out the $1 million that was added for, under the capital line asphalt,
Right.
which is, as we know, a transfer from the bonding account to the operating budget where we all want it to be. If you take that out, then the budget actually is a decrease, a small decrease of 0.2%.
Right.
In general, some things broke favorably for us. For example, the utilities electric, and utilities gas are down because of more favorable rates, especially on the generation side. All our bills obviously have two components. The component we pay to UI for transportation to get the electricity to us through their poles and system, and then the generation part, which goes out to a general bid, and that's been very favorable this year. So that accounts for that decrease. The only other item that jumps out at me is that the capital was up 25% to 572,500, and we can get, we can go into detail when we get to that section of the budget.
If you want to address it now, that's fine with me. If it's fine with the rest of the board. Please, Mr. White, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, basically, it's been a real tight period the last 3 years. And we essentially ask our fleet manager, Jeff Cornwell, who does an excellent job, to prepare every year a schedule of all the vehicles and where they stand in their condition based on their mileage, years in service, the shape of the body, chassis, maintenance, repair, and things like that.
Right.
So he has a schedule that he prints for, and I can share with you, that goes out this year and several years. And then, because we know that these last few years have been particularly tough, we literally go down to and ask him to reduce that list, or we reduce that list with him based on the fact, what can you keep going another year?
Right.
And so we feel that what we submit is the minimum. And what we pointed out this year, on page 208, for example, are self-cuts in equipment. Again, items that normally, because of their age, condition, and they would be planned replacement for them. But again, we feel we can give it a good try to keep them going for another year, and we think it's prudent to do that. So that leaves us with the following requests. We have the typical request of $35,000. That's for general small tools, everything from small snow blowers to chainsaws, et cetera, drills, et cetera. The next item is a John Deere backhoe, which was in last year's budget. It didn't make it. It's 15 years old. It's one of three, 11,300 hours. It's way beyond its useful life. There's questions with the boom. The hydraulics are sloppy. It's a no-brainer as far as we're concerned. The next one is simply replace the two maintenance van. And again, we think the maintenance records, and in particular the mileage and the years of these vehicles, 25 years and 21 years on the road with tough service, speaks for itself. These represent 2 of 6 that we have that we need to replace. The next item are 2 pickup trucks. They kind of fall in the same general category in the sense that they get used 365, or not 365, but 52 times 5 a year. So they get a lot of heavy use. And again, you look at the ages of them, 10 years and 11 for a pickup with these type of miles on it, and the service that we put on them, we think it's, they need to be replaced. Again, we have 2 of 6 of those. The next item is a ball field groomer. We have 1 of 3. This is 1 of 3 that we need to replace. The next item is a Bobcat. That's 1 of 2. 11,200 hours is a lot of time on a small Bobcat. The next item is sidewalk replacement. We asked to increase that up from $80,000 to $100,000 this year. We're struggling a little bit. We want to play a little catch-up to get our list of repairs down to decrease the town's liability with respect to those sidewalks. The final item is a large item. We have 2 of these. This one here is 23 years old, 93,000 miles. That's beyond its useful life for this type of bucket truck that's used every day of the week. And we have some concerns about hairline cracks here and there, and this has to get the DOT approval for the condition of the boom, et cetera, for safety purposes. So we don't know at any given inspection if this one all of a sudden comes out of service, but it's prudent to really replace it at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. White. This time we'll throw it open to the board for questions, comments. Mr. Stone?
On overtime snow removal, obviously didn't have any snow this year, but are you comfortable with that figure? Because it's half of what it was in 2011 and lower than 2010 and much lower than 2009.
Right. We'd always like to see it higher, but I think the consensus is in the past is that they want us to budget for typical mild side weather, not to be weathermen and think that next year, because look at what happened this year. So that's what we do. And then if we end up with a difficult winter, we have 2 choices. Come in sometime in March for that to say that we're over our budget, or try to cover it with other line items that are under budget. So, yeah, we'd like to see it higher, but we can live with it.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Mr. Tetreault?
Thank you. Just to add to that, it's kind of an ongoing discussion with each of the department heads. In certain areas, you kind of allow for a certain amount of contingency within the department, within the line. If you do that in every line, that adds up to a lot of hidden contingency without the budget, makes it difficult to track. What we're trying to do is in certain areas like this, where we can kind of define, like, it might be a good year, it might be a bad year. There's absolutely, we can be over, under, and it's got nothing to do with how we budget.
Right.
We're trying to move more of the dollars into the overall contingency fund.
Right.
So it's a general resource, and then as we move things out of there, this board, among others, would see that flow.
Right.
All right, so it wouldn't be, wow, did they use it all yet? It would be, okay, we know they hit it, we're going to move more over. So we're trying to increase the overall contingency fund a little bit each year and provide for this. So this is kind of a little bit of a financial philosophy in terms
Right.
of how you do it. But in certain accounts like this, we're trying to do it centrally rather than in each line.
Do you have any formal criteria, Mr. Tetreault, for what type of account would go towards this contingency philosophy? Obviously, something like snow removal makes sense because you really have no idea what it's going to be. There are other departments or other examples you can give about what you're kind of moving into that contingency line?
This is probably the best example of something
Right.
where there's a wide fluctuation.
Okay.
Totally outside the control of the department head.
Okay.
All right, so that's kind of where we're starting. And as other items like that come up, I'll try and point those out as we go through the budget.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Any other board members have questions? Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So glad to see that paving line item in here every year. That makes me feel like we actually did something, so I appreciate that.
We appreciate it.
Maybe more philosophical than anything else, but should our sidewalk program be moving toward that same kind of operating budget, maybe for the first selectman?
It is in the operating budget right here.
It's in the capital.
Yeah, but this is the
This
operating
This is the
capital.
operating
Oh,
capital.
operating
So
capital. Oh,
this
good
is, this
point.
is not
Yeah.
bonded.
No, good point, right,
This
okay.
is,
It's not, it's just not showing up as a line item in the,
if we were going to bond it, it would have been in the non-recurring.
It's in, excuse me, I'm sorry, in capital, line 5,700, or 57,000 on 204.
Oh, yeah, my bad. Oh, rookie mistake, sorry.
Rookie.
Yeah.
You're like the oldest rookie in captivity.
Yeah, right. And my second question, the bucket truck. I share your concerns on the boom. Is there any preemptive measures we can take, inspections, to make sure that this thing is really as bad as we think, or have we already gone through these inspections?
What do you think?
Well, we have gone through the inspections, and part of our problem with this truck is the company that services is no longer in business. So we have a particular concern that even if the boom passes now, we don't know where to service it in 6 months or a year from now. So I think it really, even though it's a big-ticket item, it should be purchased.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Any other questions? Mr. Brown?
Just going back to the paving, you still have the same goals per year to get, for the amount of miles of road you want to pave? Which I believe was, am I right, 13?
Yeah, to have integrity with the 20-year cycle, we try to do 13.65 of new pavement, but we're probably double that amount in terms of all our maintenance strategies, being like chip seals, micro seals, crack filler, other surface treatments. So in other words, in order to get the 13.65 is new asphalt on that many miles of road, but we also feel that we need double that in terms of maintenance dollars. So it's more or less, we try for 27 miles of complete road work, being crack filling, micro sealing, chip sealing. But 13.65 is the asphalt that we hope to get 20 years out of.
Are we getting that?
We are, because of the recent bond.
Even with the price of asphalt?
Yes, yes. We've had 2 great years and hope to have another one this year, yes.
When you say 2 great years, you mean?
28, 29 miles of resurfaced road.
But has the cost of asphalt hindered you at all? I guess not.
Yes, it does, but what we do is adjust. Instead of, there's so many procedures out there, instead of doing a historical mill and fill, which would mean we'd buy all new asphalt, we do what we call like cold in place, which rebuilds the base of the road and put a thinner coat on top of the road. So we just look at what the dollar values are costing us and go to an alternative measure.
Okay, so it's working.
It's working very well from our expectations, yeah.
Just a couple other line
Certainly,
items, if I
please.
can.
Oh, just on that point, what I handed out was the breakdown of how that money is spent between the different techniques, the classic resurfacing, overlay, and then the different preventive maintenance techniques.
Okay, great, thank you. If you could just go to, let me see, 54320, your line item.
That's on page 203, correct?
Page 203.
Thank you.
Maintenance of building and grounds, and we have 350 in the budget, right? So we're going to 385.
Yeah.
And my question is, are you comfortable with that number? Because I'm looking at what you've expended this year so far, which I believe is, if I'm reading this right, $424,000.
Right. If you look at the actual this year, that's distorted to some extent because it has in it the cost to take care of the remediation at Fire Station 1, which was that big overrun, and that correction to that request of $234,000 to fund it out of non-recurring capital, if that goes forward, will replenish that account and bring us back to where we should be.
Okay. I just,
We went through this, Mr. Bartlett and Mr. White and I went through this morning. It is, both the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance are aware, earlier, actually last month, passed the resolution, which includes the $234,000 for the remediation, the additional remediation at Fire Station 1. And that goes to the RTM on the 26th of this month, and if that happens, then that money will get credited back into this account.
Just want to go back to the paving for a minute. Are we getting grant money? We were expecting some grant money for these projects. Are we getting that
There, if you're talking about
for the paving?
for what, excuse me?
For the asphalt, for the paving project. In other words, we were looking for some grant money. When we originally started this, I mean, from what I see on my notes, we had grant funding. This goes back to 2010, when Mr. Flato put together this operational plan.
We get a small amount of money, and it varies each year from HUD money for road surfaces in low-income areas, but that varies each year.
And the reason it didn't hit this year is because we made a verbal commitment to them, Mark Barnhart's office. After multiple years of resurfacing dollars, he's given us money this year to put forward for new sidewalks, which is different than maintenance dollars for sidewalks. So historically, we get about $75,000, what we call low-income housing or HUD money, for road work. But again, through a verbal commitment, since he's been funding that every year and asking us to do some new sidewalk installation, we have agreed that we would do the $75,000 for new sidewalks instead. So it's not hitting the paving, in other words.
Does that answer your question?
I'm not sure.
And it's different than maintenance dollars, because this is areas of town that do not have sidewalks, or what we call missing sections of sidewalk. Like if certain older neighborhoods have 2/3 of a sidewalk, we'll come in and put the 1/3 in. But we don't use the $100,000 we're requesting for out of repair dollars. That's different.
All right. Well, Mr. Tetro?
Please, Mr. Tetro?
Mr. Brown, are you thinking of the transitional plan that was used to move paving from bonding to the operating budget?
Yes.
So we've been, over 3 years, we're in year 2.
Yes.
We increased the operating budget $1 million for paving last year,
Right.
another $1 million this year, and another $1 million next year, which will get us up to about $3.5 million, 3.7, and then we'll just have to increase that per the cost of asphalt or any cost of living increases kind of thing with that.
Yep.
There was at that same time, in order to allow that phase-in and that ramp-up of operating costs, there was a bonding resolution put through where a larger number was bonded, and that was given to the DPW department 1 year at a time. That was divided, it wasn't divided into thirds, I forget the exact breakout, but that was kind of, the bonding was phased in over 3 years, not at this board level. This board passed the entire amount, but the RTM then phased that bonding in over 3 years. So in essence, our $3.5 million we need each year is in one part made up of bonding now and one part made up of operating costs, and they're just kind of passing in the night there.
I got it. I understand. Thank you. In this plan, maybe you'll remember, it's just, we had budget funding, we had bonding funding, and then next to it, he had grant funding. And
Mr. Brown, if I could just jump in, I think that's the missing piece here, is that in the document that Mr. Flato provided to us back when we started this whole thing, there was an allowance for grant money to, be a part of this package, and you're kind of wondering, where is that, and do we have it, or is that just not something that's there?
maybe we didn't get it because,
Mr. White, are you aware of any grant money that came through specifically for, or to be allocated to this paving program, or do you have a different recollection of it?
No, the only two things I can think of is what I mentioned earlier was we had been getting a small amount, $75,000 to $100,000 a year at the most from HUD.
Right.
And this year, because they want to move it to a different priority, we're doing it with sidewalks. The other issue was that Mr. Flato at that time might have been mentioning we were taking advantage of the opportunity to put some paving around the railroad station project into the mix, and that had grant money attached to it.
Right.
But other than that, I'm not aware of anything
So basically, you're
else.
talking the HUD money, which is now being allocated for the sidewalk project, and you had possibly paving at the Metro Center, which obviously that's a one-off.
Intersection areas, right, that
Right.
were related to the, the
Okay.
traffic.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Brown?
that's fine.
Okay. That's the best thing.
Just one more line item. Fuel, we're going to talk about, correct?
We can talk about it now if you want to, because it's,
Please, go ahead.
we got quotes today, this came up the other night with the police department and fire department. We got quotes today as far as what the market cost is, what it would have been today. The market cost for diesel, and this is a fully loaded cost with, and we do pay certain taxes on this, is $3.52. Market cost for 89 octane is $3.54. When you take our budget at those levels, and we didn't have the consumption figures for the golf course, but in this department, because they had budgeted a higher amount for diesel than we were seeing here, they had budgeted $3.77. So, and obviously, Public Works, large consumer, our largest consumer of diesel. There would actually, on these market prices, there'd be a drop of $9,120. However, overall budget, the impact is would be additional costs of just over $29,000.
How about gasoline?
Primarily gasoline and diesel.
It's a mixed rate?
I'm sorry?
It's a mixed rate?
Yeah, it's actually really, the price is 2 cents apart that we're seeing between both.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, I'm still, I'm curious about that, but Public Works is our biggest user of diesel, it's not the fire department?
Public Works is the biggest user of diesel, correct. But they had previously budgeted, within the budget, $3.77. A higher rate.
What did the fire department says increased their budget by 14%, 17% this year?
Fire department's shy on current pricing. Fire department uses 98,000 gallons of diesel, and they're shy, based on current pricing, $6,250.
Too low.
They're too low by $62.50, based on their gallonage.
Excuse me, but based on the consumption you just said, we're not the biggest user.
was gonna
then.
say, my
We're
God.
63,000 gallons if fire's 98,000.
Yeah, you're
So
right.
we must be the second biggest.
Fire
help-
department's 24/7.
Yeah.
Right,
You
no.
know, I
Yeah,
just,
based
What helped
on
us is we used the wrong number when we prepared the budget, and then the
now it's
corrected
gonna go
number,
down
there
a lot
wasn't that
more?
much of a difference, right, so.
Back to Mr. Brown.
Okay, that covers it, thank you.
All right, great, thanks. Any other board members have questions, comments, concerns at this time? Ms. McCarthy-Vehy?
Just to clarify back to that grant issue, the HUD money is through the CDBG grant, is that
Yes.
correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's, and that number has shrunk each year as a whole anyway, and are you saying that it has shrunk for you, for your usage, although you're actually switching it to the sidewalks now anyway?
Correct.
Okay, so sidewalks, that's another favorite topic of mine. The money from the CDBG grant will be used for new sidewalks. Is there any other money in this budget for new sidewalks in town?
It's all repair.
No. How many miles of sidewalks do we have in town?
100,
Pardon me?
100.
100 miles, okay. And just historically, if you can help me, you're asking for 100,000, am I correct, for the maintenance and repair for the sidewalk replacement program?
Correct.
How does that compare historically to the last number of years for what you've been able to spend for sidewalk maintenance and repair?
We've been, I think, at the $80,000 pace for several
Like 3
years now,
budgets, yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
and we just wanted to increase it 20 to
to try and
catch up a little bit.
Okay. If I may go back to snow, the issue of snow removal. I remember last year during this hearing that you talked about the fact that snow removal actually hits in a number of lines in the budget. And to Mr. Tetra's point in terms of the fact that we don't know, and it's one of those things that's out of your control, are there other lines that you have had the same kind of conversation in terms of the philosophy of budgeting that have been impacted due to that change in philosophy?
Yeah, Scotty can help me out, but I know quickly, rental and storage of equipment is where we pay the contractors. Our snow effort is maybe 20% or so private contractors, and they get paid out of that line item. That's why you see a lot of variation in that. 2011 was up to $240,000 because of the rough winter. And then his salt and
Materials.
liquid chlorine comes out of materials
Yeah,
account.
materials.
Which account number is that?
Where are we? 54370, the bottom of page 203.
54370, materials for maintenance repair. That picks up sand, which we don't use any much more, but salt and brine solution.
And just one other question, in terms of the maintenance repair of building and grounds and capital. I remember, not from the last capital planning workshop, but the one prior to that, that Mr. White, you had distributed a document that was extensive in terms of the plans for taking care of town facilities over time. I assume that you have an updated document and wonder if that's something that could be shared with these boards.
Yes.
Actually, Ms. McCarthy-Vahey, I'm glad you brought that up because we've been, with the fire and police, we had asked for the quarterly review meeting to have a list of kind of the long-term, capital requests in terms of equipment and things like that. I'd like to make the same request for Public Works as well, just so we can get a sense of where you're going and, for future planning purposes, it would be helpful for us. So for the quarterly meeting, please. Thank you.
One more for now. Grants, that's something else I've been talking about with others who have come before us. You all have been incredible in your operation, and I know Mr. Bowman has done a great job in terms of securing grants. And I think perhaps this is a larger conversation, but I will just say to you, I've been asking for us to put the grants that we receive kind of together in one place so that we can understand as a town and see just how many grants are coming in. We see them piecemeal over time through approval process, but it'd be wonderful to see these are all the grants that we receive, and this is how it flows through the budget.
Yeah, the only thing I can suggest now, they are described in the budget messages, and they fall into Public Works Administration, Public Works Operation, and WPCA describe what we just received in this given year and what we project to shoot for next year.
I do actually, may I have one more question?
Oh, sure. Yes, nicely, so go ahead.
Speaking of your budget message, I noticed in the highlights and initiative section, talk about working with volunteer groups to leverage efforts. Who coordinates that through your office? How does that happen? And how do volunteer groups know how to connect with who? Because I think that's a great idea, it's a great way, if we can possibly save money that way.
Right.
Who helps with that?
They adopt a spot, which is popular. People taking over at the end of a dead-end street or an island at the end of the street, things like that. The tree warden picks those up. People know how to find us on the webpage, and they, make that flows through that. Things like, putting benches in different places or sprucing up different areas, or memorials for people, things like that. As they come in, I just give it to who I think can handle it at the moment. So it's flexible, but it gets done.
So it's more people come to you, and then you respond that way?
Yes.
Not necessarily you going out and looking for volunteers who might help with a certain effort on something?
Right. I'm speaking to more projects coming to us to say, could you help us out with this, et cetera. Boy Scouts come in and say, can you give us a project? And we'll give them a project to stencil these drains. We'll provide them with the stencils and the paint, things like that. In terms of...
Those are annuals. We're approached annually by the Rotarians, the Kiwanis Club, and they'll do commercial strips for us, like the railroad stations downtown. They'll do annual pickups. Many Boy Scout groups, even some of the Girl Scout groups, will now do beach fronts for us. Generally when they reach out to us, we'll give them a designation on where to work, and it is pretty much annually.
And all the neighborhood associations know that if they need help with a project to clean up or things like that, to call us, and we get it done.
Yeah, actually, to key off of Rich's point, many times around Earth Day, we'll get calls from neighborhoods. If we clean up this open space area near our house, can we do a combined effort where your department will pick it up? And we welcome that because, in all honesty, most of the process is getting the stuff organized and brought curbside. Picking it up isn't the larger of the task. So, we do a lot of those efforts, with neighborhoods. But to your point, they come to us generally.
Right, and I know that through some of the Boy Scouts that I know. It'd be great if there were things that you could use help with. Maybe it could go the other way too, in terms of reaching out to the neighborhood associations, if that were ever a possibility or a need.
Understand.
That's it for me for now.
Thank you, Ms. McCarthy-Vehy. At this time, I'm going to step up to the plate and take a swing. To piggyback on Mrs. McCarthy-Vehy's point that she just made, I'd be concerned about liability if you went out and actually, recruited volunteers. Is that a liability issue for you?
Well, again, we've had very good success. The Rotarian Club is obviously bringing a large population of adults, so we can trust them in the railroad setting. But when we have Cub Scouts and stuff, we put them literally on the dunes of the beach and stuff, so it's a much less, exposure in terms of traffic or anything like that.
Right.
I suppose liability is certainly a concern, but we've never had issues. We supply them with gloves if they need it, things of that nature. Pickers, if we feel the area, is riddled with glass or things that they can get cut on. But to date, we've never had any issues.
Okay, so it sounds like you're cognizant of it, at least as an
Yeah.
issue, but you
Yeah,
haven't had an issue.
we try to get a baseline of what they have for a workforce. And who I left off the table, actually, is Fairfield U and Sacred Heart University have also stepped up with groups. Again, being that they're, older and turning into adulthood, we can trust them with some good areas, and they've done some good park cleanups
Good.
as far as. And they know where they are.
You beat me to it. One other question I had, gentlemen, is on page 203, about halfway down, contracted property services, that's going up about 11%. Looks to be about anywhere from 100 to 200,000 up. Just give me a very brief synopsis of what that is and what's driving the increase, please.
Well, one of the major items is that the tree trimming and removal went up from 200,000 to 300,000. And that's related to, even though we did what we could during Irene
Right.
and the Alfred, the snowstorm there, we got behind during that period in doing the normal work. And we also anticipate what happens from, and we know this from experience, is when the trees bloom out in the springtime, that weight will identify a lot more problems.
Right.
So we know we have a backlog, and we know we're going to get hit with additional work when the spring comes. So we definitely feel we need to increase that to get the job done.
Okay. Now, where's that line? Because I remember back during Irene, there was that debate about, well, you couldn't touch a tree because it was on a UI line, but UI said that they wouldn't touch the line because you had to get rid of the tree, and there was some kind of back and forth about that.
Yeah. The truth is, and I know there's a million stories out there.
Sure.
But the fact is, when any tree is on a power line, the custodian of that tree becomes the UI.
Okay.
DPW cannot touch it, not only from an energized perspective, but they do not wish for us to do any damage to their infrastructure. We can
Right.
clearly do something with those wires, strip the coating, tug on them, and make the damage more severe. So UI comes out between de-energizing it or giving us the clearance, then we step in.
Right. So you were allowed to do preventative work if you see a tree that's kind of precariously near a line but not on the line. That's something that you guys can tackle.
We use a 10-foot distance for our crews for safety.
Okay,
Anything
makes
within
sense.
10 feet, in a non-storm situation, anything within 10 feet will generally have the UI trim that tree or remove that tree for
Makes
us.
sense. Okay, good to know. All right, Mr. DeWitt, you had something?
Follow up on that point.
Sure.
I didn't comment before, but I'm very happy to hear your contingency plan, at least, right? That we put things in contingency, which is what has always been my frustration, where at the end of the year, we say, hey, the budget's perfect, but we use the wrong line items to make the budget, right? Is this another opportunity for us to beef up contingency because we think we're going to have trees cracking in the spring, or?
Absolutely.
your
If
policy
if I
might
had
be
to
tough
pick,
to-
if I had to pick the best example, we wouldn't want to plan for 2 hurricanes every summer in every budget. So the idea is that we may have them, we may not.
Right.
When we have them, we hope to get FEMA money to pay in, but FEMA generally reimburses up to 75%, so we still have that 25% bogey to hit. That's something that I expect, rather than turning to DPW and saying, okay, guys, cut everything else you might be doing. Don't buy any of this capital equipment that you plan on buying, and use that to pay for the overtime you spent in, because while fire and police were busy that whole week during the storm, going back to Irene, DPW is busy for the next month doing all the cleanup.
Oh,
It was a
understandable.
much larger project for them. So you're absolutely right. That would be something that we ought to have a larger contingency pot for, because we don't know quite where some of that money might hit. It might be for the oil tank cleanup. It might be for the, ideally with a proper contingency fund, we wouldn't be going out to non-recurring to help fund the oil tank spill cleanup.
No, and I agree, and I think the dream date here is, at the end of the year, when the budget's short, we go to contingency.
Yes.
Look for it. We don't look to move around line items inside a budget. We go to that one pot of money, right?
Ideally, if you look down the road, part of the thought would be you have a contingency plan, fund within the budget to solve the, I'm going to call them the typical balancing between accounts, so you don't have to budget contingency
Right.
anywhere. If that got exceeded for some reason in a tough year, you might go to surplus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you might go to, and you'd probably do that before you'd go to bonding to do that. The issue we have is that our surplus is only at 5%. So we're already at the low end of AAA towns. We start hitting that, which is what West Hartford did. They used their contingency rather than bonding, and then they got dinged with a negative outlook.
Right.
So we're not in a position to have the, forgive me, the surplus in our surplus in order to be able to use it for these kind of things, and we don't have the contingency yet in our budget. So the plan is to build up the annual contingency, over time build up this surplus. Both those help us reduce our dependency on non-recurring bonding to get these things done.
Yeah, that's a great plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. I'll go to Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Bolito. More of a comment, and probably more so for Mr. Tetro and the administration than Public Works, but you guys brought the topic up. It is my belief that there's a considerable amount of damage and inconvenience to the citizens of our town from the storms because of the trees that had overgrown for many years and have not been properly maintained or trimmed back by UI. If you speak to the right people there, they will even admit that. We've cut back on those programs. We don't trim the trees as much as we used to. We've gotten away with it for a lot of years. Well, guess what? We didn't get away with it last year. And that would lead me to believe that excess damage and inconvenience was caused to everyone across the state, but specifically here because of that negligence. So what types of pressure or programs or negotiations can we put in place to put pressure on them, to get them to step up those efforts so that when something does happen, there's less damage, inconvenience, and there's less work for you guys to do thereafter?
Yeah, we've already begun a number of those conversations, if you will.
Yeah.
At this point, the UI, at least the line that or their position at this point, is that they haven't cut back on the trimming and that type of thing. And I basically gave them a softball down the middle of the plate so they could hit out of the park, and I said, hey, is the problem Fairfield? Are we too tough? Does our tree warden not let you trim trees? Do our people not let you on their property? And I expected them to jump all over that one, and they said, no, that's not the problem. What they pointed out is that they basically, they have their guideline, as Scott mentioned, similar, that 10 by 15, or based on the type of power line, they have guidance in terms of how far they trim back.
Right.
They seemed comfortable they were hitting those targets. The point they made was that we had over 600 trees fall down, or get knocked down, or get blown down during Irene. They looked at me and said, they don't cut down trees. So they can trim all they want. You can trim it 20 feet away, but when the tree goes down, it's taking down the power line too. So that's one of the challenges, or how they positioned it at this point. We certainly had, I think our estimates were 600 trees down, so I won't dispute that number that they used. Whether they were branches falling down or trees falling down on power lines, I didn't take the survey, and I couldn't argue either side of that.
It's hard to say, and I can see where that could be a part of the issue or a part of the problem, but certainly when you look around town and you saw the big branches that could have been trimmed or that are on lines even today, you could argue it both ways. So it seems to me like there's got to be some give and take on that.
And forgive me, I don't mean to let UI off the hook on a host of topics around the
yeah.
storm. You're raising good points, and I think it's got to be part of the ongoing program of working with UI. I know DPW's been doing that, I know Ken Placco's been doing that, but I think that you're right, there's a certain amount of political pressure
Yeah.
that we need to bring to bear, and I think it's not only something that just Fairfield can do, but I think the goal would be to work with other towns, other first selectmen, other mayors, and make sure that the UI towns are united in our request for pushing UI. Certainly, Easton suffered a tremendous amount in this storm and had an extended outage, as best I can tell, far beyond what we experienced here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Any other questions, comments from board members?
Mr.
Were you
Chairman?
again? Ms. McCarthy-Vahey, please.
Me again, just a clarifying question in terms of the capital requests. When you went through these, you mentioned 2 of 6 for the vans, 2 of 6 for the trucks. I'm assuming the 6 is the total number of vans in the fleet, the total number of trucks, the 1 of 2, there are 2 Bobcat loaders that we have. Am I correct in that
Correct.
assumption? That is correct. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
I just want to make one last point. I was pretty casual in the sense, in saying that the electricity went down because of just the drop in the rate increase. And I just want to make it clear, we're starting to see the benefits of some of the energy-saving projects that my assistant Ed Bowman has put in place.
Sure.
And just this year, he has a police station generator is coming online, saving us 500,000 kWh. The railroad station, we have a project to replace the lighting in the parking lot with LED lighting, saving 110 kWh. The main library was just retrofitted with new LED lighting, dimmable, that saves another 100 kWh. And Independence Hall had some tweaking of its and balancing of its system to generate 50,000 kWh. And the big picture is that from 2007 to 2011, we've decreased the consumption in our buildings by 660,000 kWh, despite having added 2 new buildings, which added 240,000 kWh. Anyway, the bottom line is that a lot of these projects are starting to bear fruit, and they're the reason why the rates are down. In addition, the electricity account is down in addition to just rates.
You know, it's obvious that you've taken a lot of steps over the last few years to bring those numbers down, and you're certainly to be commended for that, as well as Twig and other town departments, so thank you for pointing that out. All right, any other comments, questions, concerns from board members at this time? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Any comments on the Public Works operation budget? Seeing none, we'll come back to the board. Any final thoughts? Nope, okay. Moving right along then. We will go to line 5070, which is engineering. Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
Oh, you're welcome.
Have a good night. Just find a page here. You are the man, thank you. All right, page 212 for engineering.
I asked Bill Hurley to
Good evening, how are you tonight?
tonight.
Thanks for
Bill,
coming.
For those of you who don't know, Bill Hurley is the manager of engineering department, and they're a pretty frugal group. You can see that the budget has a decrease of 2.9.
Thanks and good night.
That's it. That's what I told them.
Right.
But anyway, everything that they had discretionary control over, unless I'm missing something, they decreased. So there's only some personnel items that were increased because he has a couple of THEA members.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, because of the THEA contract, that's what's showing the uptick of 4.26% payroll.
We have
Okay.
4 employees, Thea.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, at this time, anything from the board on this budget? Ms. McCarthy-Vahey.
Thank you, Mr. Bolito, and thank you, Mr. Hurley, for being here. 2 questions, one related to the $3,000 request to upgrade computer, and just wondering why this isn't in the IT budget.
Well, these are specialized computer that only affect, computer software that affect only engineering department. So we put them in.
Mr. Tetro, please.
And just another, I'm going to call it financial philosophy kind of question. There are certain things we want to centralize, certain things we don't. At some point, part of the challenge is trying to find out what the full cost of running a department is. So some of these that are very specialized to a given department, we're trying to get out to that department.
Makes sense.
Great. One other question, just in terms of looking at the narrative and thinking about steep grants and the other state grants that happen to come our way. How do you decide the priorities in terms of what gets done? So is that done in conjunction with our state reps, the First Selectman's office? Does that go back to the document that I was requesting before from Mr. White? What's the process for that, and how do you, as engineering, interface with that process?
Well, they're part of, we have two separate groups that make up, deal with priorities. We just had a recent meeting with, that Bill participates with, which sets the priorities for the upcoming year for the whole Public Works Department, because he has to be involved with the engineering of the projects that we have to do. And then he pretty much on his own, with my review and, sharing with the selectmen, what priorities he can chase, what, for example, engineering projects he can do in-house versus outside. An engineer, for example, a small bridge comes up, does he have the time to do it in-house, or do we need to go out for outside services? They're just meetings and conversations that come up with
Mr.
those
Tetro,
priorities.
at the end of the day, is it the First Selectman's call what we actually put the steep grant toward?
Yes.
Thank
We
you.
basically have got a team we put together, includes Rich, Bill, if appropriate, Jerry Lombardo, a number of other department heads that might have, Mark Barnhart, for one, who's familiar with kind of what sources of funding are.
Right.
So we kind of balance out where we can get funding from, what we should use, what falls into the steep grant category.
Right.
In doing that. So we kind of put that together with an eye on how much money is available now, and we're working with our state delegation to do that, versus, what might happen in future years, what we just did recently, so that we can maximize our opportunity for being awarded the steep grant, because it's not a guarantee.
Right. And also, there's very specific criteria to qualify for the steep grant, so that obviously frames the discussion as well, I would assume.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. McCarthy-Vahey, anything further? Thank you. All right, any other board members? Mr. DeWitt?
This is maybe for later in the budget, but I want to poke at Ms. McCarthy-Vahey's point. I'm curious why IT isn't doing, I'm looking at IT's service statement, and it's, provided the whole town's IT infrastructure, 365, 24/7, 365, right? So maybe when the IT, because I know if we ask the IT director that evening, we won't get an answer. So maybe we can ask him ahead of time what his vision is for upgrading an engineering computer, as well as all these other things he's listed here, because he's not doing anything, he's doing all very specialized work, probably nothing more,
Right, we can
any
certainly-
less specialized than that.
Yeah, we can certainly ask Mr. Leslie on that evening. Obviously, there's a very particular piece of equipment for engineering. They've explained that, so I think it's a very specific question for Mr. Leslie on that evening, so.
Yeah,
Duly noted for the record. Okay, anyone else have a question, comment, concern on this budget? All right, seeing none, we'll go to the public. Any comments on the engineering budget? All right, seeing none, any final thoughts on the engineering budget? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Early. Appreciate you coming out tonight. All right, we'll go to the next item, which is street lighting. Yeah, that's kind of on another page, so where are we at? Mr. Heller, can you give us some page number here?
185?
185?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. White. Okay, the narrative's on 184, the budget's on 185. Anything we need to know about this, Mr. White?
Well, again, it's good news in the sense that
Sure.
it broke our way with a decrease of 14.35%, and that's directly due to getting a better bid for the generation portion of the total budget cost. Again, it's distribution is one piece, distribution and maintenance in this case in one piece, and the other piece is the generation of the electricity.
Okay.
So we had a good reduction there.
Yeah, absolutely, 14.35%, that's substantial. At this time, any questions, comments from board members on the streetlights? None. Go to the public, any comments on streetlights? Back to the board, anything? Nope, okay. We will go now to solid waste and recycling. What page is that on again, Mr. Hiller, because that's kind of off the
It's
beaten
under
path
health
here.
and welfare
Right.
section.
Thank you. Good evening, how you doing tonight?
Good, thank you.
Just want to take us through the highlights and, let us know either up or down what's the big drivers that we need to be looking for, and then we'll throw it open to questions.
Well, basically, I've got a 1.43% increase in my budget. The main driver of that would be the trash fee that we pay.
Right. Okay. And what line item is that on? I'm sure it's right in front of me, can't see it.
That's,
53,200.
53,200.
Got it, thank you. Fees and professional services. Okay, at this time, we'll throw it open to the board. Any questions on the solid waste and recycling budget? Anyone? Bueller? Ms. Leclerc, please.
I just wanted to know what's been happening with the volume of trash now that we have the one-step recycling. Has it gone down? Is it?
Actually, the recycling has dropped. Our tonnage has decreased, but it's starting to come back up. In recycling, our trash has basically remained the same. So I'm not sure why.
It's counterintuitive.
I expected it to go the other way. Good.
Yeah, the region is spiked in, the region with all of our towns and the group, the recycling group, the recycling totals have increased. Ours decreased, then it's starting to rebound back, but the tonnage has been, as far as I know, it's been steady through all the towns right now.
Good. Thank you. Ms. McCarthy-Vehy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Zimbruski, for being here. That's an interesting thing to point out, and as my colleague here pointed out, perhaps some people are taking their bottles and cans back now with the economic downturn, but I do wonder what plans do we have for ongoing education and reminding people about single-stream recycling and what's available. I know the mailer that was sent originally was really helpful. Is there any kind of ongoing information that goes out via the town Facebook page or anything else to just let people know?
We're trying to get whatever we can out through the media, the lowest cost for education. So if you have any ideas.
Pass them along. Well, I guess the media is the great low-cost option, and certainly our Facebook page, but if there's a way that we can spread the word, this is one of them. So for anyone watching, hopefully they will.
Mr. Tetro.
Just to take full advantage of Fair TV, was that single-stream recycling you talked about?
Yes, it was.
How does that work, Mike?
Well, basically, everyone who has a private collector can take all of their recyclables and put them in one container, the recycling container, where it's sorted at the IPC, actually at the one up in Hartford or wherever they're taking the materials to, after they take it to the IPC in Stratford.
Okay, thank you. So that's easier for our residents and allows them to recycle more, and it's better for the economy and the ecology.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. I'm sure we could also put our budget books in there too, right? Eventually.
Now, actually, next year, we're going to print on every other line, so in between these lines, you'll see next year's budget.
Outstanding. All right, any other questions, comments from board members at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll go to the public. Any questions, comments, concerns from the public on solid waste and recycling? Say that 10 times fast. All right, coming back to the board, any final thoughts on this budget? All right. Can it be we're at the last budget here? WPCA. All right, Mr. White. That's it for tonight. Bring us home, Mr. White.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, before we start, I have two additions that I need to make to this budget.
Please. 273, it's its own section.
Way in the back. No, I did not.
Pass this down first. You're just wait until everybody gets the memo here, and then we'll proceed.
Ann, did you get one of these?
All righty, Mr. White, go ahead.
Yes, with respect to the memo, the two changes are on the utilities account, 54130. Due to recent changes in the UI rate structure, which is approved by DPUC, for large accounts similar to this one, this line has to be increased by 25,000.
Okay.
From 475 to 500,000.
All right, so that line is 54130. Thank you. 274, so they'll make the adjustment there. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the second item is something that the board discussed before.
Right, right.
That when you discussed the non-recurring capital, the project that related to Mill Plain Road
Yes.
Pump Station, which is a sewage project, should be switched over to this budget.
Okay. All right, so, Mrs. Gardner, we'll just ask for an updated page on these, just to reflect these two changes. Terrific, thank you, appreciate that. Okay, so we got the two items in the memo. Anything in the operating budget? Is there a capital request?
Yeah, in
In the
terms of-
capital request that we need to know about?
I just wanted to back up quickly that the overall budget, when you take into consideration these two additions, went from a 0.5% decrease to about a 0.5% increase,
Okay.
which I think is very reasonable considering the fact that we had to add in additional $192,000 worth of capital equipment this year. And unless you have some questions, I think the other accounts have minor increases or decreases on them.
Okay. All right, so we'll throw it up. I'm sorry, Mr. Tetra, you have a...
Just to add in, the WPCA is a self-sustaining department, so any of the items here do not hit the tax rate, if you will, do not increase the taxes that our citizens pay.
Understood. Thank you for pointing that out. All right, any questions, comments from board members on the WPCA? Seeing none. Go to the public, WPCA. Seeing none, we'll come back to the board. Any final thoughts on this budget? All right. Thank you, Mr. White. Greatly appreciate it. You know, I know we've been kind of flying the last two meetings, but I think it also has to do with the fact that the department heads have come through with some very reasonable budget increases and in some case decreases, and the presentations have been outstanding to date. So I do want to tip my cap, if I had one, to the department heads for doing such a good job. It certainly is helping us keep rolling along and get through the process, so thank you.
May I follow up on that?
Oh, certainly, Mr. Kiley, please.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that comment, I'd also like to take a second to note that the changes in the budget book this year, the format, it's much more user-friendly. It's easier to understand, and I'd like to thank Mrs. Gardner, Mr. Hiller, and all the hard work that you guys have done to change formats, and Mr. Tetro for marshaling that effort. Linda, it's a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, but I have to give credit where credit is due, and Mike provided terrific leadership and guidance in you know, changing the format.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm glad you like it.
So thank you, Mr. Tetro. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Brockfeld, seconded by Mr. DeWitt. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.